drift in a second. My name is James Ross. I'm based in Hong Kong, and I'm a producer-presenter on RTHK Radio 3, and I'm also the CEO of Asia Radio Concepts, which is a consultancy service dealing with radio around the region. We are going to talk about two very diverse radio markets and learn about them during this session. We're going to talk about radio at either end of the population spectrum. First of all, we're going to go to Taiwan with its population of 24 million people. And then in a short while, we'll talk about India with its mega population of 1.4 billion people. What are the broad differences between these two radio markets? We've only time for a quick sketch on each, but to help us along and finding out more about these two territories, I've got two very special guests. Timothy Berge, General Manager of ICRT in Taiwan, and Dr. Padmakumar from the Manipal Institute of Communication. Give us a welcome to our two guests, please. Tim, just tell us first of all what your responsibility is and just a little bit about your background in 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, so being the general manager of ICRT, we're a nonprofit foundation, so basically my day-to-day job is just managing the office and making sure that things continue in operation. ICRT, International Community Radio Taipei, we're the only English radio broadcaster in Taiwan, and with that comes many challenges.
And we'll learn a little bit more about the detail in just a moment. Dr. Padmakumar, tell us a bit about your background.
Right. So I try to balance theory and praxis in radio. That is, I was a radio jockey and a programming director of a radio station back in India. I was probably one of the first radio jockeys in a private commercial radio station. In India, it launched in my place, and that was the first commercial radio station. That was back in 2000. I was fortunate to be a radio jockey then. Right now, I'm a media educator and a researcher in radio. I am quite interested about knowing about the radio scenarios around the world. So basically, I do a lot of research related to radio, and I also teach and conduct workshops related to radio jockeying.
Great. Well, we're looking forward in a short while to hearing a bit of an overview of India. But first of all, we're going to talk about Taiwan. 24 million people, Tim, as we just said. And, it is an island. Give us a little bit of an overview of what is radio like in Taiwan. How many stations do you have? What's the dial look like?
Okay, the dial is very crowded. I don't know how many exact radio stations there are in Taiwan. I was just checking, and there is no official number for that, although I'm sure some government official knows that. But Taiwan, the radio market didn't open up until the late 1990s. Before then, there was just a handful of radio stations on the island. When they started opening up in the late 1990s, there was a ton of pirate radio stations at that time. So over the years, to get rid of the pirate radio stations, they basically made them legal. And so there's, every few feet, there's another small power broadcaster that's serving a different market. So there's tons of radio stations, but only a few were operating island-wide, nationwide, however you want to put it. And ICRT is one of those. So there's only about 5 radio stations operating across the island.
And these are FM stations?
They're all FM radio stations. Taiwan, there's a lot of AM stations, but they're not very popular. FM has always been the more popular format, both for music and for voice, too.
What types of stations are there? Are they music stations? Are they, what we would think of as top 40 stations? Presumably most of them are in broadcasting in Chinese.
Correct. So traditionally, ICRT, since we had our roots with the U.S. military as a pop radio station over 40 years ago, today we're not affiliated with any government, but we've always been like the one radio station for pop Western-style music on the island. There's other music stations, but they're probably more of a mix of Mando pop, or other forms of Asian pop music, K-pop, Canto pop, Japanese music. And the rest of the radio stations are a lot of the whole gambit. So you have jazz stations, you have classical radio stations, you have a lot of radio stations which are selling medicines kind of illegally. They're not illegal medicines, but selling medicine on air is a very suspect thing to do in Taiwan.
Right.
And there's also just a lot of talk radio stations. So there's a handful of music stations, and then the rest are probably a lot of talking about politics. Politics is very big in Taiwan. There's no real restrictions on what you can say on air except for something which is libelous or something like that. So the Taiwanese really love to talk, and they really love to be complaining about everything in their life.
Yeah, well, maybe that mirrors many countries in the world.
Right,
People
right.
like those talk formats. And where do people listen to radio in Taiwan? You know, how are they listening?
So radio listenership is really limited now to when people are driving, so they're in transit, when they're commuting, and probably at the office. Otherwise, people are not listening to the radio. If they're out exercising and whatnot, they're probably listening to music on their phone or maybe to a podcast.
I mean, somewhere like Japan, there's a lot of listening on mobile phones and during the commute. Are there big commutes in Taiwan? Are people spending time on trains, you know, doing that kind of listening?
Yes, but from what we can tell, most people are listening in their car. And so it is during the rush hour times, you know, 7, 9, 10 in the morning to 5, 9 at night. Otherwise, like I said, it's probably they're at the office or maybe at home.
And personality radio, is that a big thing in Taiwan? Do you have a lot of radio personalities, not just on ICRT, but on the other stations as well?
I would say, especially on the Chinese side, I think personalities are very important. Especially with the Taiwanese, they really want someone who's very exaggerated, shows a lot of feeling and shows a lot of empathy for their listeners. For ICRT, since we're more of a pop music radio station, you have the personality, but it's maybe not as exaggerated. They're more just playing the role of a DJ, introducing the music, talking about what's going on around them that day in Taiwan.
And you have public broadcasters, commercial broadcasters, community broadcasters. How does it break down amongst the different radio stations?
So the public broadcasters would be, for example, there's like educational radio. There's also specific radio stations for specific communities. For example, the Hakka community in Taiwan. So there's a Hakka radio station. There's an indigenous peoples radio station. There's also 2 radio stations that operate island-wide, which are controlled by the military. About 20 years ago, there was a move to push. Most of the radio stations were controlled by the military, by the political parties, et cetera. There is a push to get those voices off the air. So there's still some of those voices, but the rest are all commercial radio stations, except for us, we're a nonprofit.
You talk about talk radio. Politics, obviously quite a big thing in Taiwan, both domestically and a bit wider, perhaps?
Politics is a big thing, but recently there's been a change that more and more of the radio stations are talking about finance and the stock market. And so there's tons of programs now that there's people telling you, like, they don't say blatantly which stocks to buy, but they give you very clear indications of where they feel the market is going now. And there's a lot of people who are following that type of information. There is also just like a lot of talk about gossip and things like that, especially like the entertainment industry, and maybe gossip involving the politicians, but less about the politics themselves.
So a move to talk about finance is a move away from politics. Is it to try to avoid to talk about politics, or is it just more interesting to talk about making money?
Yeah, I think it's more just about making money, and people are being practical. They want, and in Taiwan, there's always an interest in following people who are seen as being experts or more knowledgeable about that field. And so there's a real trust in these financial advisors. Whether or not their advice is that good, who knows? Yeah.
And what about the commercial side of broadcasting in Taiwan? Is the advertising business booming in Taiwan? Is it slowing down and mirroring perhaps what we've heard earlier on in other sessions today? Or what's the score there?
Okay, so in Taiwan, most of the advertising goes through agents. And quite a bit of the advertising now, with the agents, they're actually buying blocks of time on the radio stations. And so then the problem, of course, is that if you're an advertising company, you go to one of the agents, the agent will be pushing all the advertising to the radio stations, which they control, or they're already buying blocks of time. And so oftentimes a problem we have a client who maybe wants to advertise with us, but since they're maybe contractually obligated to go through a certain advertising agency, we can never see that advertising. There's also quite a few but since the pandemic, let me backtrack a little bit, excuse me. Since the pandemic, there's been a real decline in business just in advertising overall. And so many of those agents now, they're pretty much on their death knell too. Things are very difficult now in Taiwan.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about ICRT. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your station particularly. I know you've got a few slides for us to have a quick look at.
Okay. Let's take a quick look at ICRT. And I think the main thing I want to just say is that we're a community radio station, and so our mandate from the government is that we must serve the international community in Taiwan. The international community in Taiwan is very small. Maybe 2% of our audience is actually international, members of the international community. So our main market is being a bridge to the local Taiwan community. But so either way, we're trying to serve the community, and we're trying to be that voice to bring the two sides together. So this is just kind of something I put together that I go and talk to college students oftentimes about the radio, just to encourage them to be listening. I remind them that when they wake up in the morning, this is what I want them to hear. This is a jingle which dates back over 20 years. And even to this day, when you may say ICRT to someone on the street, they'll start singing ICRT. So we realize it's very old, but it still hits the audience, and it's still something that people are affectionate towards. Okay, so ICRT, recently the Taiwan government has been pushing bilingual, and so bilingual is English and Chinese, and that has kind of breathed new life into our advertising and into our business model. So now, you know, a few years ago, there was always a push to do more bilingual stuff, English and Chinese on air. But now we're reading bilingual to mean that there should be more English. We can be that medium to create an English environment in Taiwan for people to practice English on a daily basis and to learn how to use English in a very practical and everyday way.
So does that mean when you talk about bilingual, sorry to interrupt, does that mean that you're doing the links on the radio in English and Chinese?
No. So we're trying to do more of the English, but we're saying, so they already know the Chinese. And so to be truly bilingual, then they have to learn that second language, which is English. And we're creating that environment to make English more accessible and to make it more part of their everyday life. As anyone who learns a foreign language, you realize you can learn the textbook form of the language, but that's not the way people actually talk. And what I'm always trying to stress with students is that radio, you know, it's a communication channel, and people, you know, your DJs, they talk in a very everyday style, and they use very, you know, short sentences to maybe express big ideas. And that's something that the students or, you know, office workers who want to improve their English, they can mimic that and be better English speakers. And so that's how we're trying to build that bilingual environment in Taiwan. Okay, so that's a major push for us, and we're very thankful that the government is pushing this bilingual. Okay, we're also the only English language broadcaster in Taiwan. So in an island of 24 million people, we're the only people that can be talking to international business people, international visitors on a 24/7-day basis. We broadcast island-wide. Ooh, it's kind of slow here. But, you know, so on FM, 100 across the island. The only part of Taiwan you can't hear us very well would be the eastern side. The central part of Taiwan are some very tall mountains, some very high mountains, and so our frequency can't get over to the other side. Luckily, Taiwan is a very robust cell phone network, so we emphasize that even using your phone with our app, you can hear us island-wide. And I've done that before. I've driven from Taipei down to Hualien, Taidong on the eastern side of the island. You can't hear our frequency on your car dial, but using the app and throwing out with Bluetooth onto my car stereo, I can hear us the whole entire length. Okay, of course, then we also have you can listen to us on our website, on our app, and also another push we've been doing recently is trying to get the young people in as we've been using Twitch. Okay, so people who are not familiar with Twitch, Twitch has basically started out as a video platform for watching gamers game. Okay, the silliest idea in the world to me, but it's really turned into like a platform for streaming video, real-time video. And also Twitch has enhanced messaging capabilities, so it's easier for the audience to be talking to our DJs in real time, and they can be sending emoticons, they can be sending tokens to you know, kind of pay off the DJ for doing whatever they like. And so it's just a really robust, interactive way for the audience and our DJs to be talking together.
So you're simultaneously streaming a video of the radio show, basically?
Correct, 24 hours a day, correct. But so in other words, I'm just saying that, you know, ICRT, we try to be a vibrant broadcaster in Taiwan. And despite the fact that we're a Chinese-speaking community, ICRT still ranks number 5 island-wide of all radio stations, and we have about a 10% market share.
Which is phenomenal in a language which is not the native language, right?
Correct, and I think part of that is due to our musical mix, so we follow the US and the UK charts. And at the same time, I think a lot of people like listening to us because even if they don't understand English, they like that because they don't need to understand all that talk about politics and business or just the general gossip that they're hearing on the other radio stations. So they get the music without having to be bothered by all the talk. We're also one of Taiwan's favorite radio stations. We have a weekly audience of about 600,000 people. And online, we have a unique listeners of about 250,000 every week. ICRT, we've been in operation since 1979. There's a political reason for that. You can figure that out yourselves. And ICRT is a nonprofit foundation. And so that means we have no owner, we have no stockholders. Any money that we make stays within the organization. And at the end of the day, our audience, the community, are our boss. So it's very important that we satisfy them and that we're talking and sharing information which they need and can appreciate.
But although you're a community station, you're a full FM station, effectively a commercial station, right?
Correct. So community here is our audience. It's not the area which we serve. So we serve the entire island of Taiwan, and we operate like a commercial radio station. We need to sell advertising because we do not receive government funding. And also then events have become a larger picture of our mix these days. And so COVID was a very, a major impact for us because with COVID there was no events. Luckily now we're moving out of that and we're starting to arrange events again. We're completely self-supporting through advertising, events, and products. And as I said, that we don't receive any government funding, and so that makes us very unique in the Taiwan environment.
But it's quite tough to be a non-profit, though, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of cost, and if the advertising isn't there, it's a struggle.
Correct. We have to be self-supporting. I would say the biggest detriment to being a foundation is that you just don't have the financing available that a company would. So you don't have a rich boss behind you that can pull some money out or get some financing from the bank to do whatever new project you need to do. So whatever we need to do, we have to figure out a way that we can make it, we can pay the cost and probably within a year or two. So that does limit what we're able to do. But I think we've been creative at finding ways to work around that. And like I say, so community events and interviews are an important part of our mission. And so we're constantly having representatives to Taiwan from the foreign offices coming on air, talking to our DJs, sharing with the audience what they're doing, and at the same time, like I said, letting the Taiwan community better understand what the international community is doing in Taiwan. I think Taiwanese have a very strong interest in the outside world. It's a small island, and Taiwan has had many different people coming to the island over the years, and so that I would say Taiwanese are very open and friendly people to the outside world, and there's a great interest in that. And here's some events we've done over the years. And even during COVID, we did this. This was a biking event. The Taiwanese love being able to get together with our DJs to talk to them face to face. And this is a very healthy event. We're biking. It's only like a 10K to 20K course, so it's nothing strenuous. So it's considered healthy, and it gives our sponsors then a chance to meet the audience face to face. And that's what many of the advertisers are really looking for, is those face-to-face encounters. That's sometimes more valuable than the advertising on air.
So just talking about the programming just quickly before we wrap it up on Taiwan. You mentioned you play a lot of Western pop. Is it a music station purely, or what other kinds of programming do you do on the station?
Correct. Traditionally, ICRT was music 24 hours a day. Today, from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., we do have live DJs on air, so it is music with news bulletins at the top of the hour. But then overnight, we do have programming from the BBC. We have programming from National Public Radio in the States. And we've discovered that so long as it is meaningful conversation in English, and especially if it's short format, maybe 9, 10, 15-minute programs, the audience is really willing to accept that, and they're really interested in following information like that. If it's 1 hour interview format, people turn that off.
Well, sounds like you have a great station going there. If you've got 10% share, and it sounds like you're doing really well.
Yes, luckily I think people like our music and they like improving their English.
Tim Berge is General Manager of ICRT in Taiwan. Okay, well let's turn to India, and let's welcome Dr. Padmakumar from the Manipal Institute of Communication, who's going to talk a bit about a much bigger country with a huge radio infrastructure, and that is India. Dr. Padmakumar.
Thank you, James. A very good afternoon. Yes, it's there. So we are in the midst of a new and exciting age in radio's history. I'm sure many of you will agree with that. Listeners have dramatically expanded today. Their share is very important in determining what happens on air. Social media is becoming the root of this change, and social media have become an innate part of our understanding of what constitutes radio. Using social media have provided new and potentially destabilizing means of interaction between radio's producers and radio's consumers. And this is all leading towards something which we term as social radio. Just imagine this scenario. I'm a radio jockey doing a breakfast show early in the morning here. If the rays of the sun haven't woken you up, this is your morning alarm. So what are you waiting for? Gulp down that hot cup of coffee and join me for a power-packed breakfast show. A very good morning and vanakkam. This is RJ Kumar helping you start a brand new Monday. Radio Mirchi 98.3 FM, it's hot. Okay, I am a breakfast show radio jockey and I'm doing my link here and you're all seeing me on social media. What is the effect? Just imagine if I'm doing this without the visuals. You do not know how I look. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that exciting? Why are we forcing radio towards social media when television shows are already there? Right? You're seeing your VJs all the time. People do not connect with radio just to see how an RJ looks. Why are we forcing social media into radio? So this is the thought with which I'm going to start my presentation. Yeah? So India is a very vibrant and exciting stage for radio. It's been there from 2000. So the first radio talks, the government decided to open airwaves to private parties in the year 1999. And in 2001 onwards, we started listening to commercial radio stations. Around the world, if you take a look, India is very young when it comes to commercial radio. Right? So we have a total of 388 radio stations in India at the moment. July 2005, we had second phase. We had many radio stations coming in. By 99, when it started, we had many stations. We had 12 stations initially, and then it started growing to 388. So that's the current scenario at the moment. So today, I'm going to talk about some of the issues that these commercial radio stations are facing in India. This is drawing on my experiences working as a radio jockey before, and later on, right now, I'm a researcher. I'm doing radio research, right? So my research is surrounding community radio and commercial radio. So I'm just trying to assess what are the problems that these stations have. Okay, so largely to give you an idea about Indian radio stations, we play filmy music, right? We haven't ventured into independent music as of now. Of course, there were some experiments by some of the popular radio stations in India playing independent music, but that didn't work out, and largely we're relying on film music. So if you watch an Indian film, you will see that there will be 5 to 6 film songs that are very popular, and it's very popular around the world. So Jock Talk, right? So that's largely in the local language. We have many languages in India, so it's largely in the local languages. And we have premium and mass radio stations. Although some of them call themselves premium, we do not actually know what is premium in it, because radio stations in India are free to air. Anyone can access. So how can you position yourself as a premium radio station when the stations are free to air? And we also have mass stations which are doing really well, and they're making a lot of money in terms of listenership as well as revenue. They're doing really well, the mass stations. So, and something about topicality. And topicality is something which is very important for radio, and that's what they're doing there. So now let's come into some of the issues that commercial radio stations have, challenges, because I've just given 15 minutes and I have to cover a lot of points. So the FPC format, fixed point chart, is a format. It's largely all the radio stations follow a 4-hour show format, except for one station that belongs to the Sun Network, which has 1-hour format, right, of programming. So largely, if you listen to all the radio stations, you will not find any difference from one station to another. Probably all the show fabrics early in the morning will be like, hey, there was a celebrity who walked out of the airport, and could you please count the number of hickeys on his neck? Probably you'll find that video on Facebook or Twitter, or Instagram. We're just going to upload that there, and you're going to count the number of hickeys, Probably that is a kind of content or show fabric that is there, because they've not gone beyond entertainment. So I'm talking about the scenario for the last 23 years. Nothing much has been done in terms of programming when it comes to radio in India. So probably it could be the case around the world as well, because I have some experience working in some of the radio stations in Australia, and I realized the difference is not much of a difference even in Australia when it comes to radio programming. You have a lot of sales heads becoming the programming heads of these stations, and they dictate terms. They just absolutely have no clue about what has to go on air, how to select a show fabric that resonates with people. Probably they're chasing numbers and they're so much pressurized, but they do not think about how to differentiate their radio stations in terms of content. Then the other thing is domesticated voices. Many of the voices of the listeners are heard, but not really heard. So when I say that, many of these stations have this capacity of domesticated voice where they record the voice of the listener to make it very crisp, but that doesn't sound real, right? So the listeners are largely imagined listeners, and they're not real listeners who are participating in these shows. So largely it's about domesticated voices that you get to see. This is a scenario that is there around the world. Why can't you put your listeners live when listeners will decide whether they will be in a position to identify the real listener rather than putting him as an imagined listener. And then there are other ways of creating imagined listeners, like you read their names and this person has written this. You don't really know. The listener will not even know whether that listener is for real or fake, right? You call out those names. So domesticated voices. And then the other problem is lack of audience analysis. You sit somewhere in a place like Mumbai, right? A closed circuit in an AC room, and you decide the content for the entire nation, which is so diverse. You wouldn't know what suits a Coimbatore market. You wouldn't know what suits a Chennai market. A Chennai market is completely different from a Coimbatore market. Ahmednagar market is completely different from a Mumbai market. A Delhi market is completely different from Mumbai. But you almost have the same formats in all these places, in spite of having a diverse population. So there is lack of audience analysis. Radio programmers who are sitting here, probably you'll have to sit and work and get your research first. Try to understand who your listeners are, what they are, what you're doing, rather than setting the FPC or programming and then reaching out to them. Then a lot of activations, right? Today, if you find a lot of stations, they are interested in tying up with brands and taking it to different malls and conducting these activations. Activations, yes, it'll help promote your station, but not at the cost of taking your RJ there and exposing himself or herself. Ideally, anonymity factor is something which is very important for radio. People should not know how an RJ should look like, right? So that has been the stronghold of radio for many, many, many years. And today, when you're pushing them onto the social media, when you're pressurizing them to appear on social media, do their shows on social media, it is becoming more like a visual media rather than a traditional radio setup. So it's high on activations. And commercial digital interests are also, when you use your digital media, yes, you can use it for promotions, no doubt about it. But how you're going to use it, you'll have to think about it. Probably it's not by exposing your RJ, probably talking about the content. Someone was talking about it. How will I create visuals for my podcasts? You don't have to create visuals for podcasting. Podcasting is an oral media, right? Oral media. So it has to be that way. Theater of the mind has to be alive there. Right? You don't have to put a video of a jockey doing a podcast rather than they talk about the content. So what is commercial digital interest? Like, you'll have to think about it. And then creative efforts of ordinary people. Always, if you look at it, a lot of people contribute to your radio show's success. But are we properly acknowledging them? Are we properly giving them the due recognition that they deserve? Is something which is a question mark. Probably you'll have to think about it when you involve ordinary people on your shows.
Dr. Padmakumar, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. We've got a lot of issues to get here and we don't have much time. But you've identified these issues, but how do we fix it in Indian radio? I mean, what is the solution to some of these problems?
Solution is you need professionally trained people entering into radio stations. Radio is not going to go. Someone was saying that radio is going to die if they're not getting into the digital space. That's not the truth. Radio is supposed to be one of the oldest medium, and it has survived internet and television, 24/7 television. It's still there. Today we are having a conference for Radiodays, and we're talking about it. So that means there's something magical about this medium that has to be considered. And I think a lot of people should take such research carefully, right? It should be highly research-based.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like in India you have this opportunity, huge opportunity for radio,
right,
because you've got so many stations, you've got such a big population. Yeah. But how do you then get enough trained people to overcome these issues? That must be a huge problem, right?
We have a lot of courses in media and communication. Earlier, we didn't have such courses. We had a lot of engineers and doctors getting into the radio space. Today, you have so many media and communication colleges around the world. Probably, if they are reputed, they will have good professionals who are training them, and we can get good students, good professionals out of these students.
We need to wrap it up, really. Any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
And quickly, I'll just finish. And there are always edited and framed utterances, which I just mentioned, and also music adulteration. You're trying to kill a song by tagging a song, right? Mirchi hat-trick brought to you by so-and-so brand. You club 3 songs. Probably song tagging is going to kill the listening experience. Then auditorium music testings are not being conducted, which is very well documented about the effectiveness of AMTs. They use air checks for AMTs. An unpredictability factor is lost when you're actually teasing the songs, right? Probably a listener will have to sit and wait for a song, and he'll be like, oh my God, this is my favorite song, rather than people promoting that song itself. Then disconnected links in music, especially after the radio automated softwares, RJs have stopped following songs. It's a music manager who schedules the music, and the RJ doesn't have any clue about the music that's been played. And there is no connection between what the RJ talks and the song that is being played. So that is another problem. And weak database of music because of the automated softwares. And people do not worry about converting passive listeners to active ones. So how do we convert passive listeners to active ones? By direct engagement. Right? Probably you're going to understand the DNA of your listener even before you start preparing for your shows. So that could be a solution, right? And one last point, a lot of digital influencers are being called to become radio jockeys. Digital influencers are not radio jockeys, right?
At that point, we need to leave it. I mean, you've certainly identified a number of issues. It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm sure you'll be at the
James, sorry, this is just not the...
we have to finish, unfortunately, because of time. I'm sure you'll be at the forefront of training all of India's future radio talent. So, Dr. Padmakumar, thank you very much for taking part, and thank you very much to Tim Berge, General Manager of ICRT. Can I have a round of applause for our guest, please? Thank you very much.
1 minute. Thank you. But this is not just the scenario of India, but around the world, you will have many such issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much this afternoon to our panel. And now we have another session from Radioplayer, and the team are going to come up here and they're going to talk about their business and what they're going to see right now and in the future. So please put your hands together for the Radioplayer team. Thank you very much.
Hello, Kuala Lumpur. Thank you to be here with us at the end of this afternoon, just before the drinks, the session, the networking. We will try to do with you an interactive session. Don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask some questions. We will have also time at the end of this presentation to just exchange all together and see what we can do for you. I'm sorry for the people that were with us on the next session just before track 1. You can sleep during 30 seconds, 45 seconds if you want. Radioplayer is an organization owned by the broadcaster, only by the broadcaster. In all territories where we are with public services and commercial radio at the same time. And it's really important when you're a radio aggregator to say that you can work both with public services and commercial radio station. We are present everywhere in Western Europe, also in Eastern European countries soon, and we hope also to have new countries in North America like the USA and Mexico. We are already present in Canada, for example, and the next goal, important goal for us now is to invest a lot in your continent, in Asia. That's why we have new investments from all our shareholders. And just to remind you that Radioplayer is an organization funded by the BBC, Bauer Global, indeed the main UK broadcaster, and we are owned by the local broadcaster in each territory. In Germany, we are owned by the German broadcaster, and the same in every territory. And if, for example, one day we start a radio player in China, in Thailand, in Malaysia, the goal is also to have a local company owned by the local broadcaster in Malaysia that could manage radio player in this country. Radio player is an app on smart TV, on mobile app, on mobile phones, also on smart speakers with Amazon and Google, and a real focus on the automotive sector. That's why I will now detail why it's so important for you as a broadcaster to be present in a car, into the car. Strong competition now in the dashboard, because in the old age only FM was available. Now you can connect your smartphone, you can have access to Spotify, to Apple Music, to YouTube, to TikTok, to a lot of different platforms that will just take some time from the radio station. It means that, for example, people that, for example, listen during 2 hours the radio before maybe take just maybe 20 minutes on TikTok, 10 minutes on YouTube, and maybe 10 other minutes on podcast. That's why it's really important to improve the radio experience into the car. All the new cars, and especially the EV, the electric vehicles, are connected, and we are now in competition with worldwide platform. And the worldwide platform don't care about radio. That's why we are here to protect the broadcaster against the tech giant. The goal of Radioplayer is only to secure the distribution of the radio into the car and also into all the other devices. We work with the broadcast. We are a big fan of FM and DAB+. We work with Red DAB on the promotion of the DAB technology, DAB+ technology. We see 3 ways of developing the audience of radio into the car. First is the classic one. You need to have on your own app an interface with Android Auto, these 4 images, and also on Apple CarPlay, because we are also present in every car equipped by Apple. The good way of promoting your radio station into the car is also to invest a lot on the standalone OS system called Android Automotive. Android Automotive is a system owned by Google, and it's really important for your radio station to propose an app on this environment. The only problem is that it's complicated. It's really expensive also to build your own app. That's why Radioplayer is here also to help you. You can see on the screen the partnership that we have with the brand Renault in Europe. It means that we can propose on all the Renault cars a radio player for Renault. We are present with this app, the Android Automotive app, in all the different stores, Arman, Forestia, P3, and also we have partnership with Amazon and Google to develop the presence of your radio station into all the connected car. The last way to integrate your radio content into the car with a new fashioned radio experience is the hybrid radio solution. Hybrid radio is the best, the best world between the good quality of the sound from DAB and from FM, and on the other side, the good availability of IP. It means that with the hybrid radio solution, you can continue to listen your radio station via FM and DAB+, and at the same time to get all the information, all the metadata, all the on-demand content from the IP. For example, your morning show finished at 9 a.m. in the morning. It means that your listeners, via his dashboard, could, for example, listen your morning show in live situation until 9 a.m. and just after 9 a.m. on the same screen have an access to the past episode with the on-demand system directly integrated into the dashboard. It's really important for you as a radio station to consider that now there is no real borders between live and on-demand content. Radioplayer is now integrated in all these different brands in Europe, but not only, also in Canada and all the other parts of the world. For example, we work with Japan, with some car manufacturers. And the goal of Radioplayer is also to expand everywhere, and the first priority for us is now Asia. That's why you can see some cars at the bottom of the screen. It means that we already have some secret agreement with Chinese car manufacturers. It was really important for us also to show you that we are already implemented into the car. I would like just to finish before to leave my colleague on stage some BMW integration on the hybrid radio model that we can provide, and also on Audi. It's really important for us to have a permanent radio button in the car. It means that we negotiate to the car manufacturers to have a real space for radio station, and not only to propose maybe somewhere a button to access to the radio. It's a real difference compared to our competitors, because we don't sell any entertainment system with video games, with video, with audiobooks, with podcasts. The real goal of Radioplayer is to promote radio and only radio into the car. It means that when a car manufacturer as Audi, Renault, or some of us sign with Radioplayer, they are forced to put first this radio button to be sure that radio media will stay alive in all the car in the next few years. I think it's time now to speak about the consumer product. And for this part of this presentation, please welcome Ole Jørgen Tovmark, the head of non-automotive project. One more time, the head of non-automotive product at Radioplayer.
Thank you, Yann. It's really good to be here in Malaysia and being a part of Radiodays Asia and talk about what Radioplayer does for the radio industry, and hopefully we can collaborate a lot in the coming years. As a member of Radioplayer, your station is not only a part of our industry collaboration, but you also get your station into state-of-the-art apps and products. And you will be a part of an aggregator that works for you as a broadcaster, where you have 100% control over your own content, the distribution, the rights, the revenue, and the business models. And the mobile app is Radioplayer's most important consumer-facing product. We have recently launched our 7th generation of the app, completely rebuilt from the scratch, with all new code inside, but still based on our experience in 10 years as the radiogator working for the industry. And it's supported by our new backend system, where you as broadcasters deliver directly all the content to us. And that makes sure we can offer high quality products and content. The app is divided into 3 main sections. You have the main one, which obviously is the live part. The user can discover stations through recommendations, through search, through browsing through genres, or via suggestions based on the user's location, or simply try something trending. And all stations are, of course, also available in an easy-to-use A to Z list. We do also have an easy mode or a car mode, which is a feature for safe use while driving. The user can easily change favorite stations by simply clicking on a large logo-based button. And combined with Bluetooth, or just by connecting with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, like Yann mentioned, you can choose your preferred way to access all the stations while you're driving. And finally, we also have the podcast part, because the app is not only for live stations, it's also a great podcast app with high-quality content from broadcasters. And whatever you choose to listen to, you can always connect the app to your speakers through Chromecast or AirPlay. And the app can even be remotely controlled by a companion app on your Apple Watch or Android Wear. And finally, the app can also has useful features like alarm, so you can wake up to your favorite radio station, a sleep timer, and dark mode, of course. And the app, as Yann also mentioned earlier today, available everywhere in every store where you expect to find apps like this. So Apple, Google, Samsung, Huawei, Amazon. And this is everything in place already. So for you as a broadcaster, it's an easy way. Radio listening via smart TVs is popular in many countries. Therefore, we are pleased to offer also a series of different TV apps called Radioplayer for TV. The TV apps have been rolled out during the last couple of years. Oops, there we have them. Thank you, Yann. And it's a very easy to use TV app, which is very similar to the mobile app. And you have all the things you expect: live stations, podcasts, search, A to Z list, etc. And we offer these platforms, or this app, on the following platforms. You have Apple TV, available in App Store. You have Android TV solution for Google Play Store. And you have also for Samsung TV and LG TV in their stores accordingly. And not at least, our TV apps can also be adapted into set-top boxes from TV operators, like we do with Sky in the UK, Ireland, Germany, Austria, and Italy, Orange in Belgium, and Telenor and Telia in Norway. And this is a very easy and affordable way to make the app available and offer all stations in the country in one place, in people's living rooms. Web players. It all started with web players 10 years ago, more than 10 years, it's actually soon 13 years ago, in the UK in 2011, where the goal was to make online radio easy again, like a traditional radio receiver, with all stations in one place. And the web players have been developed, of course, with more features, but the key one is still the common navigation across all stations, where the users can save his favorites and search through all the content in one service. And it offers also both live stations and podcasts, and it comes with different tools and widgets, so each station can have its own kind of look and feeling. And it's still a very popular product, but of course, as for all online listening, more and more users prefer apps. Then a little bit about multi-room speakers. And we have been working with a couple of them for many years, especially Sonos. And this is a very easy integration. The first time, the user just choose Radioplayer as a content provider, and after that, you can easily enjoy all the Radioplayer content on your Sonos speakers. And the goal in the long run is for us to strengthen this kind of collaboration with the partners we have and new partners, so we can make the radio experience even better and easier. I did also mention the companion apps for wearables or smartwatches. And this is, of course, a niche product, but the people who have it, they really love it. And the companion app, which I mentioned, is just a kind of remote control for your phone. While we also have standalone apps, like the one showed here, which is Radioplayer for Watch, where you can use it without your iPhone. You just need your AirPods, and you can go for a run and still listen to your favorite stations and podcasts. And then finally, we have worked for a long time to explore the opportunities with smart speakers and what they bring to radio. This way, we have learned a lot about the possibilities, but also the challenges for radio that come along with these products. In the countries where the smart speaker products supports the native languages, Radioplayer has been available for many years with skills for Alexa and Google Action for Google Assistant. But we now see a trend where the tech giants who owns these voice systems actually and luckily and finally try to find easier and better ways to offer radio and more directly from the broadcasters. And this is exactly what we are working with. So we are partnering with Amazon and Google with the aim to improve the voice-controlled radio experience and help broadcasters like you to gain better control over your own distribution. That was a quick run-through of our products, and if you have any questions about these products later, I'm really happy to answer any question you might have. But now I'm going to give the control to another colleague, which is Lawrence Galkoff, and he looks after all our countries around the world, and I'm sure he wants to invite some of you as well.
Thank you, OJ. So it's good to meet you all. I'm Lawrence Galkoff. I'm the General Manager of Radioplayer Worldwide. So it's my job, hopefully, to join with some of you as broadcasters in countries in the continent of Asia who might want to join Radioplayer. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the structure of Radioplayer, what we do and how we do it, really, so you know a little bit more about us. So, as I say, we'd love countries in Asia to be joining Radioplayer. We want to expand and bring all the things that we do in Europe and North America to this continent as well. So it's important to say, first of all, how Radioplayer is different from other players in the market. So Radioplayer is a country-based platform. We know that most listeners want to listen to the radio stations from where they come from. They don't want to listen when they ask their smart speaker or they search in an app for Kiss FM. They don't want Kiss FM from Brazil or Italy. They want Kiss FM from their own country. And this is really important, that it's easy to discover and find your own radio stations. So every radio player is owned and operated and controlled in the country it works in. So, for instance, OJ is a country manager for Norway, for Sweden, and for Denmark. So each of those three countries has its own radio player. Yann previously ran Radioplayer France, where all the French radio stations came together and worked together in a French radio player that was owned and operated in France. Same in the UK, same in Germany, same in all of our countries. And in those countries, the broadcasters join together, they collaborate, public service and private radio stations, to form a company or an organization that will run Radio Player in their country for the benefit of their listeners. And collaboration is so important now, because the competition doesn't come from the radio station down the road anymore. The competition comes from the multi-billion-dollar tech giants who are operating on a global platform trying to take your audience. And if they succeed in taking your audience, they're also reducing your revenue. So it's really important that we work together as an industry to ensure that radio remains strong and dominant and keeps the audience that it's had for the last 100 years. Radio is a huge success story and will continue to be so if we all work together to make sure that we're competitive and we have a good product. So it's a one-stop shop, really, for radio in your country. All the apps and the integrations that OJ has talked about, the car products that Yann has talked about, we're a one-stop shop doing this for you. And we can do this because we are a big organization, as you've already heard, owned by broadcasters across many countries. Lots of investment to be able to give you the products that work well for your audience, for your listeners, and for your radio stations, doing stuff that broadcasters themselves can't do because of the investment we have. And one of the first questions that I hear is, but we've got our own apps. why do we need something else? If we've got our own radio station app, why do we need a radio player app or radio player integration? And to me, the answer is that people listen to more than one radio station. Your apps will be great. They will serve your audience and they'll be fantastic. You can do much more about your own content in your own apps, but listeners move around. Just like on an FM radio, you expect to hear all radio stations. You don't have one radio for one station, another radio for a different radio station, and you have to turn one off and one on every time you move around. That stops people finding new content. It makes it difficult, and we don't want to make radio difficult. We want to make radio easy. So absolutely, have your own apps, but also have an app that you own and control that has all your radio stations from your country in it. Because that way, by doing it yourselves, you're controlling that, and you're not allowing another party that you have no control over to do it for you. Because all these other aggregators know that people want to hear everything in one app. So they will produce it, but you can't control it. And they can charge you what they like in the future to be on their product, if it's the only product that's available. They can push their content to the top and your content to the bottom. They are the gatekeepers. They control stuff. With Radio Player, you own it, so you control it, and you decide how it works best for your listeners.
We are going to reach the end of this presentation in 3 minutes. Please prepare your question, and we will answer just after.
Absolutely. So Radio Player really is the nervous system of radio as well. So we operate the brains that disseminates all the information through the systems to the apps and to the car dashboards, so that it becomes very easy for you to control the logos and the branding and the look of your radio station, the feel of your radio station. It's transmitting that essential data to all the products, and you make sure that you put in the right information, the right keywords, so that people can find your radio station easily. You're in control of all this. We're 100% owned by the broadcasters. We only work in your interest. We have no shareholders to make a profit. You decide how Radio Player works. You sit around the table with us and with the likes of Google to make sure that you control our roadmaps and our destiny, because we are broadcaster owned and broadcaster controlled. And that makes us very different from everybody else. And it's so important that you have no shareholders who are thinking about the next bit of profit. It's all about radio, about broadcasters, about listeners, and that's how Radio Player works. So we want to work with you to collaborate in your future success. You need control over your own distribution. You can't rely on third parties to do it for you, because if they do, again, they will have their interests at heart and not your interests, and that's very different from our attitude. Radio has always been simple. Radio should remain simple, and it's also important that you have a strong national platform to make sure that you represent your own languages, your own culture, your own music and art, and your artists, your own news, because we know that radio is the most trusted platform out there. So you should be controlling this and making sure that your listeners have access to all of this from your radio stations. So come and talk to me. We would love to have Malaysia, to have Thailand, to have all the countries from the continent of Asia joining Radio Player to make us even stronger, help us represent you in this continent. Come and talk to us. We'll tell you how you can join Radio Player, how you can collaborate within the country to make sure that we can integrate you, we can help save you money by doing the things for you that you don't need to do yourselves, and we can also represent you when we're talking to all these other platforms as well. And you can join the 20 countries that are already in Radio Player in Europe and North America, and the 400 million people that can already access Radio Player across those two continents. Come and join us as the Asian continent and be part of Radio Player as well. And we'd love to have you as part of the collaboration, as part of the broadcast industry's biggest organization of this kind. So we want to talk to you. We're outside. Come and talk to us, and it would be great to come and meet you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you very much. OJ, just before the networking drinks, do you have any question for us? We are ready. Or maybe not.
How does Radio Play differ from something like Apple Play in the car? What is the difference?
The difference is that you don't have to plug your smartphone on the car to have the great experience of a radio player. The difference also is that when you work with radio player into the car, you control the recommendation algorithm and you control the way your radio station will be shown on the dashboard. It's not the case when you use Apple CarPlay on Android Auto. And there is also a question of sharing of the data. When you work with Radio Player on the Android Automotive OS experience, for example, on the hybrid radio side, you are sure that we will give you all the data that you need also to drive your audience and to help you to understand where are your listeners and what are you waiting for from your radio station. Yes? Multilingual voice integration?
Yes. Is it in the car? And because I saw a smart speaker listed there too.
Exactly.
So can you request your radio station in language?
Yeah.
Well,
Do you want to also-
we work with the big voice operators like Alexa and Google Assistant. So we don't offer more than they do. So unfortunately, we are dependent on where they are, and they do not work with all the languages. But we're getting there.
But you really need to think about voice integration, not only for smart speakers, but also for the car integration. For example, we work with Stellantis in the USA and also in Europe, and at the same time we work with Amazon. And because Amazon will provide some infotainment system to Stellantis, it was clear that we can also help in this area. It means that voice is not only for smart speakers, but for all the different devices now. And about the multilingual, for example, if your radio station is on a country with different languages, it's possible for us to put some synonyms and to, adapt our model to your specificities.
And I think the synonyms are really important because nobody else really does this. Only you as a broadcaster know what your listeners are going to ask for when they ask for your radio station. They could ask for Radio 5, they could ask for BBC 5, they could ask for all sorts of different things, but you know that. So by putting in the right synonyms into our system, you can tell the voice-activated system what to listen out for. And that's really important as well when you've got languages that aren't necessarily represented by Google and by Alexa, because you can use phonetics to try and reproduce how that might sound to the voice-activated system to make it easier to find your radio stations.
And maybe a last point just before the networking drinks. Your question. You saved me, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Keith from SPH Radio, Singapore. So for radio aggregators, we use TuneIn, right? So since we are already on TuneIn, right, if you were to work with you guys, is it more of are we able to work in tandem, or is it more of a replacement to TuneIn?
Oh, I think you have to work with both. I cannot say that Radio Player will replace all the other competitors, TuneIn and all the others, but what I can tell you is that we are not exactly the same business model. The business model of Radio Player is to get money and information from the broadcaster to provide some information to the car manufacturers and to the all device provider. On the other side of the business, TuneIn and the others sell advertising on your stream, sometimes with or without any authorization, and they will also monetize your content and sometimes your data to other partners. It's not exactly the same model, but for example, what I could recommend you is to continue to work with all the other aggregator, and after you will create with us the Radio Player for Singapore, find a way and a strategy to close day after day your distribution strategy. I will not say that you have to close all the different environments, but maybe more control your streams and the way you provide information, because now, worldwide, maybe more than 99% of the streams provided by the radio station are freely accessible and really easy to pirate. And that's why I think you need just to control the distribution, and that could be with or without TuneIn, or with or without Radio Player, but I recommend you to be where are your listeners.
to be in control, I think, should be the thing here. You want, as a broadcaster, to own and at least control your own FM transmitters or whatever you use for broadcast. And it shouldn't be any difference with IP. You should have control. You shouldn't be necessary for you to share your income. So get control over your distribution is what we can offer.
We would like to thank you for this session, the late session in the afternoon. Now it's time for drinks and party. Thank you very much and see you on our booth just outside.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Radioplayer team. And as Yann said, there's drinks and nibbles outside for all of you. And thank you very much for joining us on this first day. And we'll see you tomorrow at Radio Days Asia. Thanks and goodbye.